Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is HawkCast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Hawkeye Beacon and Rivals.com. I'm your lead analyst and host, Elliot Clough, at Elliot Clough on Twitter, joined by managing editor Ross Binder here on this Thursday evening. Before we get started, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, drop a like, drop a comment, let us know what you're thinking of Iowa's portal haul, because that's exactly why we're back at it just a couple days later. Following the Mark Gronowski commitment, Iowa's got Sam Phillips signed as of today. I almost said Mac, not Mac. They're the Mocs, the Chattanooga Mocs, transferring from the FCS level up to the Big Ten after posting 153 catches for 2,088 yards and 9 touchdowns over his several years at Chattanooga. So uber productive. Speedster. This is a guy who can beat you with that speed, whether it's route running, whether it's you get him a swing pass and he makes a play, or you throw a deep ball and he beats the defense deep for a touchdown or a big gain. This is a guy that, I think a lot of people and detractors of Iowa, Nebraska fans, Iowa State fans will say, oh, it's just FCS. Well, sometimes it doesn't matter. This is something we talked about with Gronowski, right? Phillips is a guy that will, it's not even Jacob Gill type of addition. This is a guy who is super productive at his last school, has shown it repeatedly, and is going to be fun. Ross, what do you think about the addition? And obviously, this is one that we kind of knew was coming for a little while, hinted at to premium subscribers a couple days ago. And then, of course, came as I was driving to Iowa City for Fran's presser. But what'd you think of the addition, Ross?
Yeah, and you mentioned this is kind of one we'd had our eye on for a while. Iowa had been working him for a while. The vibe seemed good. Virginia Tech was the other main school trying to get him out of the portal, and they got a couple other receivers, so that was good for Iowa. Gave them less competition. But yeah, I think he is a really strong addition because he adds, like you said, he has a lot of speed, which is not something Iowa had in abundance in this wide receiver group this season. They had a little more. They had some size. They had some, possession guys. But in terms of that, take the top off the defense. Really scorch things. Not a lot of it. That I think Iowa fans were hopeful. Caleb Brown would be that guy when he got to Iowa a couple years ago. Obviously, things didn't work out there. But Phillips, just he's a smaller guy, obviously. I think we should acknowledge that. 5'9", 185. Not a guy that's probably going to be, banging on the outside or going up and getting the ball or anything like that. But he is definitely a guy that, can really stretch a defense vertically. He can take a lot of, what Iowa likes to do is they love using speed guys around the line of scrimmage. So you mentioned screen passes, short little dump offs, the end around game. I would think he'll be a part of that. There's a good chance at least, or at least, a decoy for that. So there's a lot of different ways you can use him. I think he'll be a very exciting addition to the Iowa offense. And, I think we've said that at least since the season ended, and probably before that was Iowa needed more weapons on offense. Well, here you go. They got a new weapon. Like this is a new guy for Tim Lester to play with in terms of his abilities and add it, see what his skills can bring to that scheme. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what he's able to provide.
And I think this is an important point to be made that I didn't make in any of my writing, the free stuff or the premium, is this isn't a replacement. This is just flat out an addition based on what's already on the roster. And you mentioned Caleb Brown. Maybe he can be what they had envisioned, or what I guess we had envisioned for Caleb.
Right.
You get him the ball in space and let him make a play, and he can be a guy that comes in and rather than quote unquote moving down from a place like Ohio State. He's moving up to a Power 4 level, and this is a point that I made about Mark Gronowski too. Is that I think Iowa goes after these guys because they recognize it's a quote unquote moving up and they know they're going to have to earn whatever they get. It's nothing. It's these guys who win FCS who might have gotten a little bit of attention from a program like an Iowa, like a Tennessee, but didn't get that offer out of high school and chose to go the FCS route. And now they get to fulfill this dream this final year and really work their tail off and earn it. And that's what you're hoping for with a guy like Sam Phillips, like Mark Gronowski. And when I talk about it's just a straight up addition, it's not a replacement. This, especially considering how little Caleb Brown did at Iowa, this is a I mean, you're getting him and Jacob Gill, who was the safety valve this last year. You're getting him and you're getting Dayton Howard as a go up and get a guy, or Reese Vanderzee or Jarriett Bowie. You're getting him and you're keeping Addison Ostrenga and Zach Ortworth. And you're getting TJ Washington to throw in there as a fun weapon as well. Kamari Moulton, Jazz Patterson. The comp I kind of made in the three thoughts article afterward is it's he's like a combination of a TJ Washington and Caden Weegan with better ball skills. Like to me,
Yeah.
that's what like he's a receiver. Weegan's specialty is a return game. TJ
Yep.
Washington is a running back, and he will be a
Yep.
full bore running back going into next year. They won't bring him over to receiver. He'll be full bore running back. That's it. And with Phillips, he's been a receiver his whole career, so you can trust him to make some of those catches. There's a highlight that I saw of him reaching as he's on the sideline and snagging a one-handed pass or one-handed catch with his right hand. Those are plays that are hard, more difficult for a guy like TJ Washington to make or Caden Weegan to make in game, right? So you're getting a receiver who's done it. Whereas Gill, you're getting a receiver, right? With Bowie, Dayton Howard, Reese Vanderzee. Reese Vanderzee played quarterback in high school. Dayton Howard didn't have a single other scholarship offer from anybody else. Jarriett Bowie's still coming along. So this is a guy that has done it at the Division One level and that is a full bore receiver. This is a weapon for Mark Gronowski. This is, and I was told by a source, they're looking for speed. They got it.
Yeah.
They got
Yeah.
it.
I think to me, you mentioned the comparison, like a combo of Washington and Weechin, and the whole situation kind of makes me think that this is potentially, maybe a better version of what Iowa was hoping to get with Seth Anderson too. Another guy from FCS who was productive, but I think he only had a year at that level. Phillips has a lot more track record of production, 3 really solid years with Chattanooga. So he's got a lot more experience, a lot more reps and ability. Seth Anderson's still in Iowa City, so still the potential for things to come good there. But I think there's a lot more to trust with Phillips based on that more experience that he has and the ability he's shown with Chattanooga so far.
And speaking of that experience, I included this quote in my three thoughts article from Tim Lester regarding the passing game and getting things figured out because it was still awful this
Yep,
last year.
very bad.
Yeah, consider the quarterback changes, considering the quarterback play, all things considered, it made a lot of sense. A lot of youth in the receiving core. Luke Lachey took apparently a step back, at least in production, right?
Yep.
Still an awesome player, still going to have an NFL future. But anyway, this was a quote from Tim Lester saying that the passing game was not good enough this season and described it as not up to par. He said, "We have a long way to go. It's the hardest thing to get going. There's been some games that we're averaging 7 yards a carry on the ground and we have a lead. And as much as I want to throw it, it's not smart for the team for me to throw it." And he mentioned timing. Timing was a really big thing. And you're getting an experienced guy now who has had to figure that out in order to have this type of production. I think that's really underrated in this edition. That level of experience and understanding of timing in college football, I think that's a really underrated factor here.
Yeah, and to go along with that, point about timing is, I think one of the most exciting things about Iowa getting Gronowski and Phillips is that they got them now, so that they get them to have them for the full spring practice session, all of training camp before the season this fall. when they've added these other guys like Caleb Brown, and Gill, like they came, kind of midway through the summer or whatever, or after that spring practice window at least. So, there's just less reps, less time to get acclimated. They're going to have the best possible situation here to work with Tim Lester, work with the other guys in the wide receiver room, the other quarterbacks, etc., and really get up to speed and, get things ready to go for the fall. Like, getting that extra preparation time, I think, will be really, really beneficial.
That's a really good point. You mentioned Gill and Caleb Brown there. Neither of them, well, Gill still hasn't gotten a spring in Iowa City, and Caleb Brown got one. So this will be interesting. And I mean, talking about the receiver room, we mentioned every name except for Terrence Smith, who's coming in next year as a freshman. And we've gotten a little bit of intel that there might be another late addition at the wide receiver spot. You want to learn more about that, you can head over to iowa.rivals.com. We've got a little bit about that on our premium board. But
But as the other name, I would say, yeah, KJ Parker, right?
oh
True friend.
yeah,
He redshirted this year, but will be available next year. So
how could I forget? KJ is my guy.
yeah,
I covered his recruitment, and
you
he's got
you
some special talent.
you've been high on him since Iowa got involved with him, and followed along with reported all the steps of his recruitment. So yeah, I think a lot of guys to watch, but he's definitely going to be one of them.
So high on him that I completely forgot his name. Uh, anyway,
No slight, KJ.
yeah, right. And he got a little bit of action in the bowl game. I think Jacob went down with something really. He just had to step off
I,
the field quick, and
I
he
think
played
he
like a
literally
minute and
played
a half.
one play.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I tweeted KJ Parker sighting, and then he never saw
Yeah.
the field again.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one to watch too. And to move the conversation forward on this, but also stay on the topic. Ross, I don't know if you saw my tweet about this yet, but I exchanged some messages with Phillips a couple days ago regarding his decision and what he thought about Mark Gronowski, and I'll share this tweet. I'll just read it verbatim. Sam Phillips told me prior to his announcement that the Hawkeyes edition of Mark Gronowski had its part in his commitment to Iowa. This is a quote from Sam. Definitely a big factor toward my decision making. He's a dog, DAWG, and can ball. And so we're already seeing some of the ripple effects of adding a guy like Mark Gronowski to this roster. People in the FCS know that he's a baller, and all you got to do is look up his highlights and see the same thing. He's got a cannon, and we can continue to heap praise on him. Obviously, a lot to be seen yet. We want to
Yeah.
go through the spring and everything, but I somebody commented on our podcast about Gronowski and said, "Haven't you seen you guys smile like this before?"
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that Chattanooga played South Dakota State at all, so I don't
they
know if
they didn't,
they
but
didn't.
but
But
I'm just saying
I
FCS level,
absolutely. I was just gonna say, yeah, he didn't get to see him, in person, Phillips, but I'm sure he's obviously aware of what Gronowski and South Dakota State have done at that level. Like, they've just been dominant the last 3-4 seasons. So, obviously Phillips is familiar with that. And yeah, he knows he can ball, and seeing a guy like that come to Iowa has to make you, as a receiver, a lot more excited about the possibility of suiting up for Iowa than, no offense to the other quarterbacks in the room, but they haven't proven as much. I think that's a fair thing to say about what they've done so far. And, having a guy like Gronowski that has done it, at the FCS level, not yet the Big Ten level, but just a ton of experience at that level, that has to give you a lot more confidence as a receiver that, again, to quote Sam Phillips, this is a dude that can ball. So
yeah, it's you said not to slight the rest of the quarterback room, but it's a lot easier to get excited about a guy like Mark Gronowski than it is Brendan Sullivan or Hank Brown, right? So
100%.
that it would make sense for Phillips to say that. Now, having the receiver, having the quarterback, we've talked about this before, but I want to bring it up again because it's important. It's what's next in the portal for Iowa. And Well, I had a tweet about it, and it has since disappeared from my timeline. I put a tweet out regarding a
You had
what
a
we should,
poll.
huh?
You had a poll.
A poll. Yes.
I got it here. What does
Okay.
Iowa need most out of the portal now that they've added Sam Phillips and Mark Gronowski? You had cornerback, left tackle, and other. You had 600 votes, so nice little sample there. And 76% said cornerback. So they are really wanting corner. 20% said left tackle. 4% want a mystery player.
I just found it as you brought it up. So yeah,
Yep.
solid sample size. And I know we've talked
Yep.
about this before, and some folks have commented and said that they trust Phil Parker to move the defensive backs forward. And while I understand that sentiment, Deshaun Lee and TJ Hall have been around for a little while. I think this would have been the year for them to solidify that they'd move forward. And
I,
it's also, if I can just let me finish here, regarding guys like Rashad Godfrey and Jalen Watson, those are positives. They're also Rashad Godfrey's going to be a redshirt freshman. Jalen Watson's going to be a sophomore. Jalen Watson's going to need spring in the weight room for sure. I'd probably put Godfrey in that boat too. But I am not of mind that I would not be comfortable if I were in Phil Parker's shoes, I would not be comfortable going into another season with this same defensive backfield that you currently have. You got to add something to it in my mind, whether it's now, whether it's in the spring. You got to add an experienced corner that you can trust to at least, you're more or less never going to lock down a side of the field in college football. That's just not, feasible unless you're Cooper DeJean. But it they need help. And I think Sasha Garcia would have been a great addition, except for he's going to Wake Forest. So they don't have any other visitors lined up that I know of, and they need help. They need help. TJ Hall and Deshaun Lee, I think, are good depth pieces at corner, but I don't think either of them are your number one guy. So that's where I'm at with that.
yeah, and what I was going to say is that I know we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and I was not as bullish on adding a cornerback. I think I've definitely come around to your position, especially, got to say, after the Music City Bowl.
Yeah,
They really got picked apart
by
by Mr.
backups,
Cook.
by backups.
Yeah, yeah.
Fever.
The third best Missouri receiver going off for like 180 yards on Iowa was like, I think there's a need here, a bigger need here. So I'm in agreement with you. They need to get an experienced cornerback, and I think you mentioned this in the Three Thoughts article that really made a lot of sense. But getting that more experienced guy to kind of serve as kind of the leader of that cornerback room and the mentor of that cornerback room, I think would be really clutch because there's definitely talent there. I think Lee and Hall have talent, albeit inconsistent. Godfrey, Nestor, and
Watson.
Watson all have a lot of talent too, but it's very young, very raw still. So getting a guy that can kind of be a leader for that cornerback unit would be so huge because it's one thing for one of those guys to emerge as kind of like the number two starting cornerback. I don't think I was going to go out and get like two brand new starting cornerbacks, probably just the one. But getting somebody that can step in as that lead cornerback would be a really big thing for this secondary. And I think give Iowa fans, and I'm sure Phil Parker, for being honest, more confidence in that unit for next season. So, yeah, finding a guy either, out there right now or waiting until after, for the next transfer window, which wouldn't be ideal, but do what you got to do. They do need to add another quarterback. I agree with you.
And it's not like they haven't been trying. That's one thing to
Yep.
point out for sure. They had Rayon Strader scheduled to visit, which of course we shared with our premium subscribers when we got that. But ended up committing to Auburn. They probably dropped a bag, and then Sasha Garcia, who I believe is from the East Coast, staying over there, going to Wake Forest. That makes sense.
Yep.
But they need help.
They do.
They need to go get somebody. Who it is, it's starting to wind down a little bit towards spring ball, so I'd be a little surprised if they're able to make something happen. But they've got a little bit of time. Otherwise, it's got to be after the spring. So either way, I think it needs to get done. Either that or somebody's got to make a massive jump.
Right,
Massive. So
right.
regarding offensive line, and I said left tackle specifically because I think right guard is going to be handled by Cade Peeper this year. That or Leighton Jones, because Peeper's been taking snaps at center as well. So it would make sense either way. Peeper's a guy they really like. Leighton Jones is a guy that's progressed quite a bit, from what I've heard anyway. But at left tackle, it's Trevor. I never know. I heard Lauk. I've heard Locke. Trevor, I'm going to say Lauk. But Trevor Lauk from the Indianapolis area was a 4-star recruit out of high school. Um, but Iowa had their eyes on Ethan Onianwa from Rice, who signed with Ohio State. I believe there have been other names, just like one or two other names at tackle, if I'm remembering correctly. I can't remember who they are off the top of my head. But they've gone after those big fish. Had some positive. There were some positive rumblings around Onianwa. Ultimately, like how can you blame him for choosing Ohio State, right? It's Ohio State. They're
Yeah.
gonna have a shot at a national title here shortly.
They're playing tomorrow night, Friday night
Yeah,
in the semis. So
exactly. So can't really blame him there. Otherwise, one thing that we hear from Kirk pretty routinely is that you see these guys start to really figure it out come year 3. And if that's Trevor Locke, I gotta find the pronunciation. But great. I mean, if he can be a 3-year starter at left tackle, man. I mean, he was a 4-star for a reason, right? And I think he's got some potential. We've heard a decent amount about it. You wrote about it during bowl prep. So I guess I don't know if anything's sticking out to you from what Jennings Dunker or Mason Richmond said at that time. But
yeah, he was a guy that they both singled out, and I think there was another lineman too, maybe that his name just came up multiple times as a guy like, okay, who's impressing you in practice? Who's a guy to watch for next year? And his was the name that came up, I want to say most consistently among the, guys who weren't kind of regularly playing this year. So, I think he's a guy that has definitely been bubbling under the surface, making strides that fans haven't seen because he, obviously hasn't got on the field. But he's a guy that I think there's a lot of confidence in what he can do when he does get on the field. And to me, the way Iowa's approached that in the portal is it kind of supports that. Like they're looking for guys who would be clear, no questions upgrades. And like, okay, if we can get a guy who can step in and, just lock down that left tackle position immediately, no questions asked. Like Oniawa, is that?
Onianwa.
Onianwa. Yeah, going after some big fish, and if you get them, wonderful. Like now you've got a great option there. You feel great, and you've got Lauk as a good guy to keep grooming and keep getting ready. But they're not going out to just land a guy to get a guy. They're just not trying to get another body in there to compete with Lauk or something. If they can get an upgrade, yes, they'll do it. But otherwise, they're not pursuing, and that to me says they are comfortable playing Lauk next season. If that's the way it works out, they're comfortable with that. But if they can get a guy who's just a lot better, then you're going to do that. That's just kind of the no-brainer move.
That's my read of it too. And I think the other young guy you were thinking of is Peeper. I'm pretty sure.
Probably Peeper.
I remember
Yeah,
Dunker saying he was like a freak.
yeah, Peeper's a guy that came up a lot too. Like you'd probably hear about him at the Solon Beef Days this
Yeah. Yeah.
this summer. But yeah,
Right.
those two guys definitely are poised to break through next year. It looks like, or sounds like.
Now, more transfer portal talk. Isaiah Johnson-Arigu from Miami commits to Iowa out of the transfer portal mid-year in his first year of college basketball. Would not have called this prior to the year. Jim, the little nya over the N always freaks me out when I talk about pronouncing his last name. Is it just Jim Larinaga or Larinaga?
Larinaga, I
Nate
think.
Larinaga?
Larinaga.
We are so white. Okay,
Yeah.
so retires mid-year, and that leaves Isaiah to move on, Johnson-Arigu to move on at the break of the year. But I don't know that given that context, this is that much of a surprise, but the mid-year basketball transfer is always wild to me. I guess what were your initial thoughts here on this, Ross?
Yeah, I felt the same way you did. Like, I wasn't shocked that he wound up at Iowa because, you mentioned this in the commit article, which was that, Iowa was basically one of the finalists to get him out of high school. There is that pre-existing relationship. He knows some of the coaches well. He's a not local, but local-ish. He's just from up in Minnesota, so it's not that far. So, it didn't shock me that he would come, but having him come like right now, like in January, like in the middle of the season, like that was weird. Just the timing seemed weird. And I think it always feels that way. Like anytime somebody transfers in the middle of the season, it's like, wait, what? Like what's going on here? Like this is not the regular schedule or time frame that we're accustomed to. Like there are periods when this is supposed to happen and you're shaking things up. So yeah, that part of it was really strange. But the idea of him coming to Iowa overall, less strange for sure to me.
And the other the other point to make is to I hate to give these people even the time of day, but there are folks on Twitter as call him a quitter or whatever. Context matters. The coach just quit. Like,
Yeah.
come on. All right, if we're not going to hold
Yeah.
this grown man to the same standard, what the hell are
Right.
we doing?
Yeah.
So ends up deciding to go to Iowa, a close second school for him in his high school recruitment. I mean, his head coach at Totino Grace told me that he thought he was going to go to Iowa for a little while. So the fit makes sense. Decided to do that, and I do think scheme, or I guess scheme, that's more of a football term, but like organizationally with Iowa's offense, it makes sense. He's a guy that is a really good athlete, kind of a point forward that you can put the ball in his hands. And he scored a lot in high school too. 19.6 points, 9.1 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and 2 steals per game as a senior. And I don't think I included this in his article, but his assist to turnover ratio was like 4.5 to like zero point 0.2. Crazy.
That's yeah,
Crazy.
that's insanely good, especially for, a bigger guy, essentially.
Who had the ball in his hands all the time.
Right.
Point forward, both in AAU for D1 Minnesota, same organization as Price Sanford, by the way, and for his high school at Totino Grace, where he plays with Dothan Ijadimbola, who is now, I believe, a junior going this season, and also a stud, also plays for D1 Minnesota, also an Iowa recruit. So if I don't know how close those two are, but that doesn't hurt. I'll tell you that. Dothan's a stud. If you can get
Yeah.
Dothan, that's a win. So,
Yep.
but to get back to Isaiah, his dad actually worked with the NBA Africa Academy. Originally from Africa, he's had that training. Isaiah has an opportunity to play for Africa internationally. I don't know if that happened this last year, but in the future that'll be the case. Or I guess not Africa, but whatever what the country his dad's from. I'm not positive what country that is, but um, just he's been around his coach at Totino Grace for a little while as well. Nick Carroll, a guy who lives and breathes basketball. Isaiah has been around the game for a long time, and you can tell by the way he plays basketball. I'm not sure how much of the highlights you watch, Ross, but he's
Mhm.
got that, but he's also a freak athlete. Like I tweeted that video, which I'll put in the description here, of him doing that back cut for a lob dunk, just put it on a dude's head. That was at the state tournament in Minnesota. So this is a big ad for the future of Iowa basketball. He won't play this year, but that was a future, or that was a focus for me in the three thoughts particularly, is this is a move for the future of Iowa basketball.
Absolutely. He's a guy that if Iowa had, got him out of high school a year ago, people would have been super excited to land him. Like he was, a really, really good recruit. That combination of athleticism and just, that basketball IQ, basketball skills is a really strong combination with him, it looks like. And that's exciting. That's a really exciting thing to add. And he kind of continues a trend we've seen with some, Iowa really targeting athleticism more and getting it more, both in some high school recruits and out of the portal, getting guys like Tajo and Traore. I'd say Thelwell too has added a lot of athleticism, and now this guy and Diakite, right?
Badara.
Badara. Yeah, so I think there's just a good trend there for Iowa, and it's going to make for some better teams coming up here. Give them a better foundation at the very least. Because I think we've seen in the past or the recent past some Iowa teams that were more limited in that regard, and it caused some issues at times for sure. So, it's good to see Iowa trying to address that, and a guy. Um, like Johnson-Arigu is a really, really positive addition on that front. And a guy, where do you see him kind of slotting in with the lineup next year potentially? What does that possibly look like?
I
To kind
think
of replace Peyton Sandford or different kind of
no, he's not that type of shooter.
right?
Yeah, I looked at his percentages. He didn't shoot that many threes this last year, his senior year. So that's something he's definitely got to work on
Yeah.
to be part of the rotation. But you mentioned if he had been at Iowa this year, I think he'd be playing right now. I don't know that Iowa would have gotten Chris Tajo if that were the case, though. So, you
Yeah.
know, give or take there. But regarding Isaiah, I think he could be like a secondary, tertiary ball handler if you need him to be, kind of like what Price is right now. Price played point guard when he was a senior, or yeah, when he was a freshman rather, for Waukee when they won the state title. And but that's not been his focus for a while. So I could see him being that with more of a wing slasher kind of guy. I mean, we've seen the dunks, right? Like it's not just that one. I saw it in person this last year. Again, put it on its dude's head, extended and threw it down. It was nasty. So to add that athleticism, like you mentioned, they could have severely used it like last year when Ben Krikke and Pat McCaffrey are your guys. Like you're missing some
Yeah.
athleticism. But to get back to him, I think he's that wing tweener versatility type that we talked about before we started recording. Is Fran loves those guys who can play a bunch of different positions, and Isaiah is a guy that you can put the ball in his hands and he can go coast to coast. He can drive on really good defenders and throw it down. He's got really soft touch. I like his midi. It's not quite Josh Dix level, right? But it's something that does give some level of encouragement that he can improve as a shooter, as a 3-point shooter, as a free throw shooter. So I think he's probably a come off the bench guy, probably similar to what like Cooper Koch has done so far this year, but way more athletic. And he can impact the game that way. I think he needs to grow as a defender, which tracks with the type of players Iowa recruits. But he has that residual athleticism, right? That allows him to just, you can recover quicker, you can swat shots, and I think he is bigger than people think. He's 6'7". Like it doesn't necessarily jump out on film, but he's 6'7", and he can do a lot of good things. Guy again that's been around the game for a long time, and I think will fit right into what Iowa wants to do. I think I said it already, but will not play this year after transferring in at semester. Probably we'll see where he's at eligibility wise. But he will not play this year, and of course we've got more on that eligibility stuff for our premium subscribers at iowa.rivals.com. Ross, we've been going at it for a while. I want to go watch the college football playoff. We're going to post this here tomorrow morning, Friday morning, but recording this on Thursday night. Just one quick thing before we get out of here. Iose Epenesa playing in the Navy All-American Bowl. I know people get pissed whenever I say he's a 4-star on Twitter, or Rivals does. Again, I don't make that decision, just so you know. But he playing against some really high level competition in the Navy All American Bowl, so he's probably going to get a ratings bump from us, probably a big one. Doing a lot of really good things down there. We've got that content on iowa.rivals.com as well, video, stuff like that from down there. So it's been really fun to see some of this stuff, see him match up with some really good competition and kind of dominate them in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, and I think it's a natural follow-up to what we talked about the other day with Iowa adding Hawthorne and talking about that D-line rotation. Don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but Iose definitely, I don't want to say definitely, but there looks like a real possibility that he can be, a factor in the rotation next year. Like the way he's just, owning guys at this event and just really looking impressive. He's a guy that's going to come in with a lot of ability, and it would not be a shock to see him carve out a little role for himself at the end next fall. And things like this only reinforce that belief for sure. So really good stuff from Iose down there.
I'll read this quote from Sam Spiegelman, who's covering him down there. The Iowa signee played like he was shot out of a cannon on Wednesday. Iose Epenesa fired off the ball and moved extremely easily off the edge. The future Hawkeye blew past opposing tackles from both the left and right sides and won with speed and power. And there's more on him again at iowa.rivals.com. Feel free to join us today. We'd love to have you. You get access to a ton of content, especially right now. Basketball portal, well, football portal too, and then basketball going on with the men and the women at the moment. We're covering recruiting. Big visitor coming up this weekend in Joshua Lewis. We have that interview with him as well. So we got you covered there at Hawkeye Beacon. Join us today, iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. We got that link down there in the description for you to join us. Before you go, you might be listening but not subscribed, so do that today. Hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, here on YouTube. Drop a like, drop a comment. What position do you think they should go after? Is it corner? Is it offensive line? Is it something else that we missed? Do they need another receiver? What do you think? Let us know down there in the comments. And again, don't forget to drop that like, leave that rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that good stuff. We appreciate you tuning in. Once again, folks, I am Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Ross Binder. For now, we will see you next time.